The following is a dramatization of a real audio recording. This audio has not been altered or edited in any way except to remove all identifying business and personal information.
Let's see if can I help you.
Yes, hi. Who'd you say your name was? I'm sorry. Yes, hi. I was working with a guy earlier who was letting me know that they had a regional position, but I don't. He said it'll be difficult because I don't live in Arizona. And at the time, I wasn't interested in over the road, but after thinking about it, I am interested in over the road.
What's your name? Give me a second.
All right.
Hold on. What I'll do, sir, is I'll have to give you a call.
You said you
I'll have
give a call?
yes, I'll have to give you a call. Okay?
Okay. Do you know how long that would be?
30 minutes.
Okay, perfect. All right,
Thank you.
How are y'all doing today? All right, so that was a pretty funny video. The unfunny part about it was all the audio was from a client, from a real driver call, unaltered. So when we talk about the commitment stage today, I want you to keep that in mind. In the commitment stage, it's the first human element being introduced in your recruiting process. So we've talked about the awareness and the work that goes into your marketing to make that stage happen. We've talked about the conversion, getting that lead or that application. When we talk about commitment, it's getting that application into a hire, making that hire. Turning around and taking that hire and getting that soft level commitment and getting a hard commitment to get that driver into your truck. So when we talk about the goals of commitment, we're talking speed to lead, the sense of urgency, instilling that sense of urgency into yourself and your team. Lead nurturing through communication. And we're talking ensuring the driver stays motivated throughout the entire process. We want to be able to connect with the drivers. We want to be able to keep them going forward in the entire process without leaving anything stale out, like in that call. So when we're engaging with the applicant, we're talking speed to lead. When we're thinking speed to lead, it's often talked about, but the one thing missed is actual execution. We have to use our tools in place. We have things like autoresponders, we have things like call to actions, and we have things as goals, and able to reach out to the drivers in a certain amount of time. You have to have goals, and you have to be able to meet those goals. They have to be realistic. So best speed to lead practices. Well, let's talk about call to action. A lot of times we have unnecessary communication. Maybe we send an email saying, hey, we need an application. Is that link to that application readily accessible to the driver? Maybe we need a phone call. Do you have the phone number in there? Often what I'm seeing in my shoes is communications that's got unnecessary referbacks to previous communication. It's a missed opportunity. Make your opportunity and what your call to action is accessible to that driver in that current communications. Using your autoresponders properly. What do I mean by that? It's a great opportunity to bring your best self forward. Again, we're talking about the first time the human element is being introduced in the recruiting process. This could be supplemented with your auto-response. It allows you to incorporate yourself. It allows you to bring in your culture. It allows you to introduce the call to action, maybe a full application, before the recruiter even gets to reach out. We also get to do the ideally 1 to 2 hour ratio of reaching out to that lead as soon as it comes in. But the problem with that is that often it's not happening. We see 1 day, 2 days, sometimes we see a week before a lead is touched by an actual person. So if it converts from an auto response and no one's actually following up with this person, it's a missed opportunity. And this is all on the recruiting side. When we talk speed to lead, we're talking recruiting departments and the individual. When we talk speed to hire, we're talking the overall carrier as a whole. So let's talk about nurturing that lead. You get that application. You did all that work, all that marketing got put to work, well used. You get the driver on the phone. You have to nurture that relationship. It doesn't just cultivate into a hire. At no point is that driver just lining up and saying, you're the only one I'm applying for. What makes you special? Well, we can accomplish this through being respectful to the applicant's time. Be mindful that you're not the only carrier out there. You're not the only person they can apply to. You can also do this by giving updates, setting proper expectations. So how do we stay in touch with the driver? How do we nurture that relationship? Using communication, providing updates and expectations throughout the process. Let them know what's to come. Just like you expect things from them, they're expecting things from you. Another thing we could do is utilizing the tools. Often we're not utilizing all of our tools that are before us. We have reminders. Even if you don't have it through your ATS, you might have it through your calendar. If you tell the driver you're going to follow up with them in a timely manner. Be respectful. Turning around and keeping all their questions answered. So when a recruiter talks to them, we're talking the main things: trucks, home time, pay. Often what seals the deal to get the driver to agree to go into processing. But when they go unpack that with their significant other or their family, other questions arise. Well, why don't we reach out and ask about additional questions? Forecast that there's going to be new questions, and if there's not, there's maybe some diligence to be done there to make sure they completely unpack the offer the way we presented it. Well, during the process, it takes time. Some carriers, it could be instant, 1 to 2 hours, 3 hours, get a general approval. Sometimes it could be days, depending on how you're set up. The longer it takes, the more updates you have to give. And if that driver has to call you to get an update, well, then you've missed the opportunity to establish that relationship. And when we're trying to build that relationship, the best way to do it is through trust and being mindful of their time. So these people getting an update from us is a lot better than them calling you to get an update. And it'll help you build that relationship with the driver. Shows your dedication to bringing them in. You should be appreciative that they reached out to you and filled out that lead, did that app, and agreed to go through your process. So now we're talking about keeping the driver engaged. This is where it starts to shift from speed to lead to a speed to hire. And this is where each carrier is unique. You could have a speed to lead that's very fast, but you can drop the ball when it comes to speed to hire. So the longer that process takes, the more you're going to have to keep that driver engaged. And there's multiple ways to do that. We can set yourself up for a win. We can turn around and use touch-ins, give updates, try to drop little breadcrumbs along the way. But the best ways to do that is making those touch points, using your texts and emails. Use all the tools available to you to reach out to that driver, build that engagement, keep that excitement. And then there's the breadcrumbs that I mentioned. I want you to think about when you go buy a car. Maybe you ordered it, base model, you're happy, but it's got to get shipped to the dealer. Now it gets shipped to the dealer and it gets delayed. The dealer calls and lets you know that there was perks included in that car that you didn't already made aware of, but you were happy with the initial purchase. So you find out maybe it's got an upgraded stereo package or heated seats. Now when that car gets there, you're even more excited than before when you initially bought it. I don't think anyone would be disappointed with the extras. Well, you as carriers have put a lot of thought in your packages, but often in recruiting, we're talking pay, home time, trucks. But what's not covered is the mile per gallon bonuses or the incentives that you've diligently worked on together to put in front of your drivers. These could be used as breadcrumbs. And when you use the breadcrumbs correctly, it'll lead the driver through the process and keep that excitement to make that hire and get that commitment. Remember, when we're talking commitment, we're talking making the hire. Maintain that excitement and engagement. You want to keep it personal. What's the point of doing all the work you guys have diligently done as an industry if we can't maintain the excitement for the drivers coming in? You each have your own cultures, your own exciting things, but it starts with your recruiter. That is the frontline warrior. That is the person that's representing your company. If they can't be excited, how's that driver supposed to be excited coming in? None of the rest of it matters. So now we talk about the recruiter and where a recruiting department can make improvements to identify the areas where we can get better. Complacency kills. We talked about it in this industry for a long time. What's the point in being complacent and not making changes? What works today is not going to work tomorrow. So keeping that in mind in the entire process is going to make you better. So being engaging, being helpful, being warming and inviting throughout the entire process with the driver. Not just the initial part, but all the way through, and hopefully carrying through into the daily operations. You're providing a service, not just a sell. These are people with families, bills, obligations to their loved ones. You should feel honored that they chose you to go through the process, and it should show in your processes. You need to lead with your wins. Obviously, we're not going to go out there and say, hey, we're terrible at this, but we're good at this part. You're going to lead with your wins, but you still want to bring attention to where it's not a win. You want to be the solution, which brings me to my next point. There's two types of people in the world, people with problems and people with solutions. You want to bring a value proposition to any relationship in any industry, be the solution. In trucking, as a recruiter, that can be accomplished by connecting the dots, listening to the driver's problems before you're going into your cell, and then finding a way to take your offer and connect the dots with a solution to their problem. A lot of recruiters go into their cell, but they don't listen. Ask the driver why they're looking. Why are they leaving their previous employer? The why is just as important as what you have. Well, then we need to focus on the education aspect of this. As a recruiter, one of the biggest tools I found in my experience is educating the driver on the why. I could tell them what I got, but telling them why I have it, or even better, why I don't have it. A lot of times drivers don't like the idle policies, as an example. But one of the reasons you guys try to lower the cost is so you can put the money back into the driver packages. Reframe that and educate them on the why. Just taking a little moment to explain it helps and goes an extra distance for the driver to show your commitment to helping them understand your culture. Often the simplest things are missed when it comes to the recruiting process. So this next one won't surprise a lot of you, but it does happen quite a bit. And it's updating your autoresponders, your text, and your email campaigns. If you're still using the same ones that you started when you opened your ATS, you're missing an opportunity to refresh and bring a new approach to new applicants as you reach out. How many people are sitting there using the same auto-responses, the same generic, hi, my name is, this is my phone number, I'll be helping you, call me if you need anything? Why not put in a personal spin on it? Update it. Challenge your team to update those things at least quarterly. And then you need to know your company's culture. When we're doing recruiting, you're recruiting for a culture. We always talk about retention is the new recruiting. Well, in order to do that, you have to recruit the people that fit your company's culture. You got to bring in the people that are going to mold in and complement it. You're not going to bring in people that are going to complicate it. So you need to be able to use your culture, communicate it clearly, and have the conversation about it. You should know where your company came from. You should know where your company's going, what their supports are, what they're looking to move forward with, and be able to communicate that to your recruiting and to your drivers. Well, that brings us into knowing your offer. A lot of times we'll say, we got Kenworths, we got Peterbilts, we got this kind of pay. Well, okay, what's the trucks outfitted with? How fast do they go? What kind of equipment and accessories that you guys have spent all this money on putting in there? Don't you want that communicated into the recruiting process? Letting the drivers know that you've gone that extra mile to put those perks there? What about the benefits? What type of benefits? What's the extent of the benefits? Then we're talking about pay and bonuses, and not just starting pay. What about a year from now, what they can make if they're successful and they stay with you? What about 2 years from now? That should be incorporated into your sell to the driver initially. Let them know the light at the end of the tunnel. If they invest into you the same way they're trying to get on board, you want to show them that you're invested into them and highlight those offers. The company culture, once again, people that know me know I always highlight culture. That's what you're working for. You don't want to make a square peg go in a round hole. Communicate the culture so you bring in the right people to your organization. This last one seems like it's a common one, but it's also the death blow to a recruiter. If you get this one wrong, home time, you're done. The driver's lost your trust. So make sure you know your home time and make sure it matches with what ops is telling you for those people. If they're from an area and they're saying, hey, best drivers 2 weeks out, don't be selling weekly out because it's an easy billet to fill. You need to be honest in the recruiting structure. You need to be honest, transparent, and you need to be prepared to frame everything in a positive light. This was posted by Willie on LinkedIn not that long ago, but I thought it was appropriate for what we're talking about because it often happens in the marketing and the recruiting. If you're using pictures like this nice long nose on the left, and then the driver comes and gets that white truck, you've already set yourself up for failure. Why don't you turn around and post that white truck? You're going to get drivers that accept that truck coming in versus the guy that's going to be disappointed when he didn't get the green one. You need to know what your biggest value propositions as a recruiter is. We all have competition. Some of them are next door to your locations. If the driver can only take a drive, 5 minutes or a couple steps, you need to know what your competitor is offering. You need to know for the driver's conversation's sake. So knowing how your competition differentiate from your offering, be prepared to discuss it. How many times have you had a driver come in and say, well, they're paying this much. Well, what if they're getting less miles and you're getting more miles? What actually makes the driver more? Be prepared to have that discussion. Knowing how your offering solves the driver's problem. Again, we're talking problems and solutions. If your offer solves the driver's issue and they've identified that issue earlier on in a conversation, being able to sit there and connect the dots is going to help you in this one. And maybe they go somewhere else. They say they can go somewhere else. But it's not going to solve their problem. It might enhance it. Knowing their problem is going to give you the power to communicate this in the conversation. You need to know. You also need to know that what you're selling matches up what your company's offered. There's nothing worse than as a recruiter selling something that someone gave you and then they get there and it turns out that what you sold is not actually the goods that the company's given. If the operations person says, hey, I prefer someone that's 2 weeks out, but in a pinch I could take someone that's weekly home, and you oversell weekly home, that driver's going to get there, multiple drivers are going to get there, and they're not going to be happy because they can't service that. So keep in mind what you're doing for your company is for your company. That's who's signing the check at the end of the day, but we're also dealing with real people. We're dealing with drivers that have families, obligations. We owe it to them to communicate this properly. Is what you're advertising the reality of the situation? Are you advertising the top 1%? Or are you advertising the average? And more so, I like to dive into this one because when we're advertising, a lot of times people are going to put their best foot forward. Well, that's great. That makes sense. Except we're dealing with real people and the law averages are there. So with an average, there's people that are higher, there's people that are lower. Explain it. So you need to know where your wins are. You need to know where you actually win and be able to explain them to the individuals you're on the phone with. You need to identify what the problems are that you're solving. You need to be able to keep your talking points available. Most recruiting departments talk about their wins, but how often do you put new material out there to your recruiters to make sure that they have those talking points available? Things are changing every day for you all. You work diligently to make these offers competitive. So communicating it to your fellow recruiters and the recruiting department putting this out for their team, this is on you guys. Put it out there. Give them talking points. Another thing you can do is give them talking points on where they lose and be able to reframe those. Again, I go back to the idle policy. It's a great example. Being able to reframe something as to the why of what you're doing is going to help you explain it to the driver and turn it into a win. Your recruiter should be prepared to reframe those offers and explain them in detail. Are you investing into your recruiter training? A lot of times the answer is no. We might do internal training, occasionally do a workshop. But how many people are actually taking the time and investing into their recruiter training? bringing outside sources in to evaluate and put fresh eyes onto something. It helps you, it builds you. Iron sharpens iron. Now we're going to get into speed to hire. And earlier I told you with speed to lead, that's focused on the recruiting department and the recruiters individually. But with speed to hire, it's a holistic approach. It takes everyone at the carrier to make this work. We're talking about working closely with your safety or processing team to get the driver through and get them approved. We're talking the longer this takes, the more touch points are required to keep that driver engaged, to keep that commitment that you worked hard to get. We're also talking that we can't keep the driver waiting too long, because no matter what your process, there is a such thing as too long. If it's taking you 2 weeks to bring a driver in, think of how many other carriers can bring that driver in right away, same week. If it's 2 weeks, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what you need to hear. It's too long. You need to provide updates throughout that whole process. Think of the manpower it takes to keep those touch points going throughout that process. So understand the difference between speed to lead and speed to hire, and that it takes a holistic approach to address that is the first step to winning that battle. Because now you got to provide updates. Well, the longer that process takes, sometimes the update is there is no update. Can you imagine being the recruiter and reaching out to the driver multiple days saying, hey, the update is the needle hasn't moved, but I'm in your corner. How long is that going to go on for? Next thing, and this one seems kind of like a no-brainer, and there's a fantastic panel to discuss this later on. You know, a lot of you guys spend all this money on the marketing, spend all this time on the process. It'd be a shame to drop the ball in booking your travel. We're providing a 5-star experience. If you're going to be 5 stars here, you need to be 5 stars all the way through, because you can still drop the ball at this point. You need to be able to provide a 5-star concierge service for that driver. It's not a cookie cutter mold. Work with the driver to promptly plan details. Give them the details early on. Don't wait till Friday at 5 to send them the email. Have you accounted for the driver's needs? We've seen it time and time again. There's carriers, it was in the video earlier, everyone gets a bus. Now, a lot of us have moved past that, but we still see it out there where the guy from Indiana going to Chicago gets a bus. The guy from California going to Chicago gets the bus. Is that a 5-star experience? How would you feel taking your trip home on that bus? For some of you, it might not be that bad. For others, it might be a terrible experience. Keeping in mind each driver is a different experience is going to help you optimize what you're trying to do here with the drivers and give them that 5-star experience. You need to communicate efficiently with the driver. You need to find out what they need and what's important to them. Well, this is where we bring in improvements. How can a carrier improve for the speed to hire? Well, another way we can improve is bring in the human element. We talked about how the commitment stage is the first time a human element is introduced into the recruiting process. What if you put them in chat moderation? Instead of having just a marketing team have those comments being responded to as they can keep up, what about having a recruiter in the comment moderation, beginning the recruiting process right there on your ads? You can not only maintain the recruiting process through that, but you can also control the comment moderation that's coming through there. You can have someone there to give real-time answers, maybe get an app before they actually did the lead form. Maybe drive a phone call early on. Or there's chat moderation. Again, utilizing your recruiters, leveraging what you have, that human element, that's what they're there for, and have them in a live chat. We want to introduce this earlier on. You can get better results, but you have to optimize and take an audit of what you're doing and how it can be better. There's also virtual hiring events, and I really like this one because we live in a different day of age. Post-COVID, we found the valid reason to do things remotely. Drivers are no different. They have lives. They're working. What if you can, instead of attending this event, do a hiring event remotely and you all can attend that way? More people could attend. Accommodate their schedule. Now you're broadening your reach to the drivers. So just finding a way to introduce that personal touch, that human element, earlier on is going to help you. Well, now we have to audit what we're doing. How can we audit? Well, we can conduct driver mystery calls, have drivers tell you how their experience was. You can plant a driver to make a call, someone that's been with the industry, been with the trucking company long enough to know the rights and wrongs of what should be said in the recruiting process. You could facilitate recruiter-to-recruiter training workshops. I'm a big advocate of that. Why? Because fresh approaches. Again, iron sharpening iron. What I might say to a driver versus what you might say are going to be two different things. We can all learn from each other as an industry. And what better way to train a recruiter than with another recruiter? You can use anonymous driver reviews. So Max Farrell will be here a little later to talk about this, but it's a fantastic way to turn around and get driver feedback. You can do this internally, of course, but there's great platforms out there that specialize with this. So utilizing all the tools at your disposal to gauge the overall driver experience and isolate it. Instead of looking at, hey, how is my company doing as a whole? How was my recruiting process? How was my marketing process? How was my onboarding? How was your travel experience? Being able to gauge that is going to help you. And you need to be able to reevaluate. What's the point in conducting all these different audits and getting all this data and not doing anything about it? It doesn't help us if we don't do anything. You have to have an action plan, and you have to do so regularly. Well, there's a couple tactics that can help you on here. You know, with onboarding, you can use drip marketing, emails. Maybe no one thought about this, but maybe you can introduce your culture in those emails, what to expect earlier on. A lot of times carriers are waiting till Friday to send out travel plans because so much can change with the volatile driver situation. But what if you sent things to bring on a Monday in an email, and on Wednesday, things that you should make sure you have for onboarding? Maybe it's check for direct deposit, maybe it's your long form, whatever it may be. By establishing that early on, you're given the communication and the chance to the driver to adjust and make sure that everything can happen in a timely manner. But if Friday you send that email, what can the driver really do over Saturday and Sunday if they already don't have what you need? Well, there's also the welcome packet, and I'm big on this one. This is your last opportunity before the driver shows up to put your best foot forward. In a welcome packet, you get to communicate your culture. You also get to communicate expectations. You could tell them when you need them to check in so they don't miss that flight or bus. You could tell them everything from who to call if they get stranded, or who to call for their ride to the hotel, how to confirm their hotel. You can also turn around and recap your pay. If they got the travel in that email and they got the welcome letter and they show up in front of you and you got your pay incorporated in the same welcome packet, there's not much to be confused about. But there can be confusion if you don't. They talk to so many of you. They create their own perfect offer because it blurs together. So set yourself aside from the pack and put your best foot forward at this stage. Communicate everything clearly, expectations. You're setting them up for success, which sets you up for success. Another thing that we can do is we can do a webinar. What better way to show a driver expectations, the resources available, your culture, than to have a webinar available during the onboarding process. Once they're approved, plug them into the webinar. They get to see what you can offer. They get to see the same faces that they might see in orientation or the individual doing their driving test. They get to see the culture of the company prior to coming in. You're building that relationship, and you're providing them contacts and resources to be successful through the final stage. All right, I'm going to open it up for a couple questions for you guys, but I appreciate you guys listening and your time. Do you have any tips for hiring the right recruiters? That's a good one. Being that I'm a recruiting company and hire recruiters, I have to do it myself. You want to find people that match your culture. You want to find people that are matching exactly the direction you're going. And you don't need to do a knee-jerk reaction to bringing those people in. These are the frontline people. These are the people that are communicating your culture to the drivers. If they don't match what you're doing, you're doomed right out the gate. That's your best foot forward. If it's not your best foot, you've already lost. So interview them, maybe even have a stage call, let them talk to a driver in front of you. My guys go through training for weeks before I start releasing them out. I've had recruiters that I've interviewed and it's just not a good fit. That doesn't mean they're not a good fit for you, they're just not a good fit for me. How we each do our own individual recruiting process matters. So recruit for that, not just for the pulse.